All right, we're on round one here. We're going to charge two. This is a random stage that was selected, as is all new stages in tournament. First stage is in a set. This is the best of three set, so we'll see that that's goes the full 3 rounds. So first one to two wins moves on. And early on, you'll just talk a little bit about these two characters and how they interact. Early on, you'll see Needle has a horizontal shot and a high jump shot from which he can shoot down at Cutman. This gives him a way to control space from a distance. It's not as effective up close. He has some tools to deal with that up close. He has a dive move that's invincible that cuts straight underneath him, controls that space well, and he has a grab in case people kind of try and play in the mid range right in front of him. Cutman has a single normal shot projectile. That normal shot is a homing shot, so when you fire it, it targets the player's location, which can be easy to avoid, but you can get stuck in patterns sometimes where you're jumping, your timing on the jumping is off, and you're jumping in perfect scenarios to where the homing shot can just kind of cover your whole path. And so the first stock, you'll see that Danie largely tries to play on the other side of the stage. Jose clearly wants to play at distance. Cutman has a couple of melee tools up close that are very effective, and so he's happy to kind of play at a distance and get shots. Now, Cutman is doing fairly well here with that, but again, he kind of retreats behind that bump at the end of the stock, and when you notice where that happens, that's not giving Cutman any benefit. Cutman, he's jumping back behind this bump, it's kind of trapping him, and he's immediately turning around and coming back. So it's not an evasive tactic per se. He's not using it to evade anything. It's something where he's giving up ground that isn't necessarily helpful to him. He needs to be taking those hits, kind of jump canceling, getting close, and thus he loses the first stock. He actually still did fairly well there. That was because Jose had a little bit of a problem, got a bad habit of evasion in the middle there, and took a bunch of hits. Now we see Denny start to use his EP. His whole first stock, he may have used one or two moves with EP. You've got to use these Shuriken to cover the space. Jose actually uses EP to clear that dive. He uses the dive to clear that Shuriken so he can stay on the other side of the stage. That's a good trade. Um, and then as he uses the EP, you see him kind of turn the match around a little bit. Jose is able to level that fairly easily coming back. That's one thing that life and vulnerability gives you coming back. But now we're in a state where Denny's using a little bit more of his EP, a little bit more of that Shuriken to cover those angles, and he's starting to make some headway. Now, this is a situation where Jose, again, we see Jose takes 5 straight hits in a row because he kind of gets in a bad habit with his patterns, and that homing shot is just getting, he's kind of locked in the timing on it. Takes 5 hits in a row, and he falls pretty far behind here. Not being able to clean up this stock early, Denny does a good job, generally speaking, of using slide and vulnerability to avoid some of those shots, enough to at least get through this. But he really needs to be using these horizontal projectiles, the Shuriken, etc., to really cover more space. Again, a long pattern here where look at his EP bar right now. He's fighting at the right range. He's actually getting up on that platform next to him. He's kiting out. He's using it to avoid aim down projectiles. Jose is falling into a bad trap himself of before he's high jumping. He's not putting anything in front of him, so he could be covering that area in front of him with some horizontal projectiles too. But because of that, kind of, there's been a long stretch here where Danny's been able to avoid the shots. Still has full AP, which is funny. He's ahead. It's hard to criticize, but this does come into play in a lot of matches where he sacrifices a lot of potential gain by just never using his EP. You got to get some of those shuriken down, make them uncomfortable, get onto the floor, and or get them onto the floor so that at least you got to clear them or move somewhere else and force those intersections that allow Cutman to really take advantage of his melee attacks. So Danny, nevertheless, despite the kind of EP run here, he's able to kind of kite this out, avoid shots, get in, and then I believe finish him off. See, now this is where Jose, this is where, there, he does finish him off with a melee attack. You notice the long stretch Jose went on there where he was dodging, 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 dodging. And that's kind of what happens with that cut blade. You can get the timing down, you can get the habits down of the cut player. You can avoid those cut blades most of the time. The challenge is changing up the timings, and Cutman has to use those melee attacks to kind of close the distance and disrupt the ability to dodge entirely. Um, all in all, it was a well fought match back and forth.